Reading ability underpins the academic success of all students. However, almost 16% of the school population in Australia identify with a difficulty in reading. So what does that mean for the future of these children? And how do we, as teachers, ensure they receive necessary support? Students struggling with reading difficulty can identify with a number of characteristics that negatively influence their ability to read and understand a text. These include reading comprehension, fluency, automaticity, decoding words, language processing, and word recognition. Reading difficulties can stem from a number of factors, and being aware of these is essential in early identification of at-risk students. A child's environmental factors outside of school, such as lack of exposure to written materials and a family with a history of reading difficulty, can be detrimental to a child's reading development prior to entering school. These factors are often associated with families from low socioeconomic status, which is evident in the statistics from schools in these areas. Once a child reaches school, the teaching environment they're placed in has the potential to accentuate lack of development in oral language, phonemic awareness, and vocabulary. The curriculum taught, teaching methods utilised, and time allocated to reading can all hinder a student's reading ability if not implemented effectively. Finally, characteristics of a reading difficulty are often indicators of an unidentified reading disability, such as dyslexia. However, there is contention around the label of dyslexia, as studies suggest that teachers become reluctant to support reading development in students with a disability label, as compared to a difficulty label. Educators often see dyslexia as a fixed problem and difficult to support. However, the strategies used to support reading difficulties are also highly effective for students with dyslexia, and vice versa. The three-tiered model response to intervention is effective in assisting students with learning difficulties. The first tier supports prevention and identification through a quality-based teaching approach. Through effective early reading instruction, teachers are able to encourage positive reading paths for students, whilst making intuitive judgments towards students who are at risk of a reading difficulty. In order to effectively identify students in need of assistance, teachers must have a sufficient knowledge of reading development and the characteristics of a reading difficulty. Formative assessments by the teacher, such as running records, observations, and interviews, as well as a variety of standardized tests, can be utilized to enhance identification. Some of these tests include Neal analysis of reading ability, which tests students' reading accuracy and reading comprehension skills, Progressive achievements in reading, which tests comprehension skills, vocabulary knowledge and spelling, and the Weld-Dahl assessment of reading passages, which tests reading fluency. The second and third tier in the response to intervention model focuses on targeted and purposeful instruction. Tier 2 provides supplemented intervention for small groups of students at risk of a reading difficulty, whilst Tier 3 provides greater individual intervention for students acknowledged as having a reading difficulty. This approach has become widely accepted in the past decade, as previous models adopted a wait-to-fail approach, which neglected to assist students until failure occurred. Throughout this intervention, explicit instruction is most beneficial. These students require authentic and frequent opportunities to read on a guided and independent level, whilst explicitly learning phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension skills. This is effectively implemented in small focus groups in which active engagement is encouraged and student progress can be closely monitored. This can become problematic as many schools are adopting a whole language approach to reading, which is far less structured and neglects to teach specific reading skills. While a balance of both whole language and explicit teaching is beneficial to most students, this style of teaching can impound a student's difficulty in reading and therefore should be avoided. Encouraging self-regulation within direct instruction through think aloud and self-questioning techniques allows students to become independent comprehenders of text. This is best achieved through observing a capable model, either student or teacher, as it enhances the self-efficacy and self-regulation of these students. The implications of failing to intervene for students with a reading difficulty are quite severe. Without intervention, the development of these students becomes stagnant. Overlooked difficulties result in withdrawal from learning as constant failures negatively affect children's self-worth, self-esteem, self-efficacy, and locus of control. This creates learned helplessness as students believe all tasks they complete will result in failure. Low self-esteem and self-worth can then lead to negative social implications, as studies show students with reading difficulties are involved in bullying as both victim or perpetrator more than their capable peers. Supporting students with learning difficulties also directly aligns to the Melbourne Declaration on Educational Goals for Young Australians, identified within the Australian curriculum, which promotes equity, excellence, and an education for all students to become successful and confident. It is also reflected in Article 24 of the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, in which an inclusive education is required for all students. As you can see, by recognising, understanding and providing early intervention of reading difficulties, teachers are able to provide the opportunity for a rewarding future to these students.